Hello, Uncontested Investing listeners. Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Nate Zielinski, joined by my co-host, Suzanne Andreessen. Today, we're going to continue our property management discussion. And today's topic is really interesting, Suzanne. We can go so many different directions. We're going to talk about leveraging technology to streamline your rental operations. The big picture, though, why does tech matter in property management? Let's start there. There's so many different ways to go with this.
Well, if you look at just the evolution of how the industry's going in general, you've got AI, coming at us at, just a steamrolling right into the space. So I think it's important that you become acclimated with some of the technology that's out there. It's really no longer optional. You've got to, and even your younger, newer residents are, they want all that. They want the technology. They want the smart house. They want to be able to, look at the property on their own time, where some of the technology is even just showing services, and how can you access the property. And they want to do it when they want to do it, through their phone, not with a human.
Yep.
Human contact's bad.
Yeah, before we get into the benefits, that's just it, plain and simple. Everyone uses it now, right? I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, you could get away with an old-fashioned system. But now, like you said, the influx of tenants coming in or residents coming in, they're in their mid-20s, they're in their early 30s. They grew up with a cell phone in their hand for a middle school on. It's all they know. And you're right, the less hands-on, I think COVID may have played a part in that as well, obviously ushering tech in a little bit faster because everything had to become so virtual so quickly for these experiences to continue. So just everyone uses it, everyone's comfortable with it, and you're doing yourself a disservice and almost kind of an outsider if you're afraid or still staying away from utilizing tech within your rental operation in the property management side.
Well, COVID definitely expedited that transition to that. And I agree with you. You have to stay in line with what's being offered. And you've got people to say, okay, I'm going to spend 4 hours on Saturday looking at many apartments and housing units as I can. They want to come in and access it and spend 3.5 minutes there, get back in the car and drive to the next unit. So you need to be offering the services that they're looking for that accommodates their schedule. It could be 7 o'clock at night on the way home from work. Whatever it is, we need to be able to accommodate what they're looking for.
Yep. And I'll call it the big four, the benefits. I think everybody that owns a property, that owns real estate would, their ears will perk up when they hear these, right? Time saving, scalability, fewer errors, so you're more accurate, and a better tenant experience. Who doesn't want to provide that? Tech can help with that in so many ways. We'll go over some of the options later on in the episode. But I mean, just right there, right off the bat, I think everybody that's listening, considering tech, those things just make so much of a difference. And not only that, not only does it help for your tenant or the client that you're serving, but it gives you a competitive advantage over your competitors, right? If they're using tech, are you using it more savvy? Are you using more options? There's so many different ways for someone that owns property to get a leg up on their competition, and using tech to kind of streamline their operations is one of those ways.
Well, and it's not, the barrier to entry is definitely dramatically reduced from that. When it first came out, people said, I want 1,000 doors or more, or they're not interested. Now, it's scaled down to really what's the lion's share of the industry are the mom and pop investors that have less than, I'll say 50 assets, even less than 25. So there's all kinds of applications and technology out there, even for the entry-level investor, just find out, and we're going to go through some of these, but there's, do your research, but there's definitely opportunities for you to engage in all levels of technology.
Yep. And I think we'll start in a familiar spot for people that will own property, investors out there. It's leasing and tenant acquisition tools. So right off the bat, you're talking about Zillow, apartments.com, Redfin. These are all very familiar. So if people want to get their feet wet, get introduced to the technology, go with a trusted website such as Zillow, such as apartments.com. Start listing your properties, start trying to attract tenants that way, because I think that's the most common ground. And people will be like, okay, technology can help me. I got somebody to fill in my apartment on Zillow within 24 hours. What else can tech do? So I think that's a good stepping stone.
And there's a few more. There's Antera, who there's some are national, some are local.
Yep.
You've got Antera, you've got Appfolio, you've got Tenant Turner. So those are going to be some of the folks that come in after that show certainly sourcing the asset and the rental property, but finding a way also to manage the experience in between the tenants as well.
Yep.
And some of them cross over between that.
When you talk local, I think even bigger picture nationally, you're talking about virtual tours and 3D walkthroughs. Say somebody's relocating to a different part of the country. They're not able to pick up everything, take a trip for a week and see all these apartments before they make their big move. They need to be able to look at these spots virtually. So having virtual tours and these 3D walkthroughs, letting them know every square inch of your property, getting them more comfortable. And from an owner's perspective, from an investor's perspective, you're just widening the pool of people that can rent from your space. Maybe it was only a few people local that weren't as serious, but then you get somebody from Tennessee who's moving to Connecticut next month. They're super serious and they're looking for that spot. So that opening that possibility, now you have your tenant for the next
Well,
few years.
and we have hot markets. You've got Nashville, Atlanta, so
Yes.
Dallas, all of these markets that you need to be able to turn on a dime.
Yep.
You need to be able to show, and some people are going to take these sight unseen. If it's a hot market, you can't. I'm going through that right now. My son's getting his first apartment. I'm going into grad school and trying to locate the property.
Yep.
And seeing, and some of them, when you look at that, and I'm like, I'm not sure that's
Yeah.
where you want to live. Versus being able to find the asset, find the location. Does it provide everything that you're looking for? Does it have? Can you live without the dishwasher? Can where is it convenient? So these are things that you want to show not only when you're showing the interior, but you also want to give the neighborhood score. How does that play into, do you need to be on mass transit? So what are the things that are going to accommodate and make your property shine a little bit better? There's companies like Seek Now. That offers, some of those sources helping to see what the asset looks like. But you're even seeing we haven't seen a lot of assets when the market softens a little bit on the buy side, even from the owner occupant piece. The home inspectors are also trying to find a way to play in that game. So now you're seeing some of the home inspection companies coming in and helping to manage the transition between tenants
Yep.
and doing the home inspection, showing that it's actually ready for rental
Yeah.
as well.
And that goes back to one of the big four benefits of saving time, right? If you have people viewing your property online, they're able to make that decision in real time. They don't need to schedule a showing, take maybe 45 minutes to an hour just to see the property, let alone driving, transportation, getting to it. So you're saving time by letting people view it online. And I think another addition to that is online rental applications and the background checks. So these are things that people might not understand when they get into the industry. They think, okay, I list my property, people will just, flock to it, right? It'll be easy to find a tenant, but there's ways to find the right tenant for you, and technology can help immensely with that.
Absolutely. And so Appfolio is one of those properties application software that's out there as well. And you want to make sure that you have the ability to, when you do your background checks, make sure that you're really following, there's a lot of ways to create fraudulent documentation. We talked a little bit about fraud earlier, but once you get a tenant in there, it's nearly impossible to get them out. Although certain states are coming more attuned to the squatting
Yes.
side of the equation. But you want to preempt that if you can, but also make sure that when they're coming in, have you done a background check? Have you done a skip trace where they've maybe in a different state have walked away. So you need to go a little bit farther than just the local market. When ask them where do they live, what other states have they lived in, because you need to background check 5-6 years, not just last year.
And that's going to lead to scalability and fewer errors, right? When you start weeding out the tenants that are flaky, the tenants that have a sketchy background, letting technology act as an assistant. There's people that utilize technology to help them here and there, and then there's the investors that can utilize tech, have it be an assistant for you, do these background checks, have that peace of mind. And as you mentioned with the fraudulent documents, that's a perfect segue into the digital lease signing and the document management. I think DocuSign and HelloSign are two prominent examples. People are probably more familiar with DocuSign, but that's another way to have that peace of mind and extra level of security, and tech can provide that.
Well, and it's just scanning a license, and there's simple software out there that lets the picture, a fake ID is a fake ID, and people are using that to actually get their rental units. So you definitely want to make sure that you found the application that really takes it from start to finish. That if it's your face on the back, on the front of it, and my information on the back, how are you managing that? Making sure, because do your homework up front. Make sure that you found where the loopholes are, because they already know where they are.
Yeah.
Even when showing this, when they have the showing and you're giving the code for access, you want to stay on top of that as well. Make sure that the code's only good for so many minutes. Things that you can do to protect the asset.
And I think it works both ways, right? We talk about weeding out the bad tenants, but it also gives peace of mind to the good tenants, right? The people that are going through this, when they see DocuSign, when they see their license scan, when they see a code that goes away, there's already those levels of safety that's being taken into their consideration, and they're more comfortable working with the investor, with the owner of the property before they even step foot in it. So from that perspective, right, we always talk about the negatives and getting rid of the people that are trying to commit fraud. But for the people that are going about this the right way, it's just makes them so much more at ease before they even step foot into the place. I think that's a win-win that people don't always talk about.
Well, and it shows that you as a landlord are from start to finish. If you're giving them a positive experience in the rental
Yeah.
process, they believe that that's going to feed
Yes.
in, even to the maintenance and everything else that you need, whether it's repairing the dishwasher, whatever that is. You've shown that you're a savvy
Yep.
landlord, and you're there to support them through the whole
Yep.
process.
And then for our investors that are scaling, we talk about cloud storage, having backups of everything, being able to have all the info of all your tenants organized in a safe spot. That's important, right? Because then once these tenants step foot and they start renting from you and are living in your property, they want to feel safe. They want to feel like their information is secure. So any way that you can provide that next level of peace of mind, and cloud storage is good for that, right? There's a lot of encryption out there. There's software out there that can really maximize the level of security. At first glance, it may not seem worth it, but if you're scaling and you now have 10, 20, 30 different tenants, that's a lot of information to manage, right? So, and then not only that, but then there's turnover, so that can multiply, double, triple pretty quickly, and having that safe is big.
Well, and how many times a year do you receive some sort of notification that your information's been hacked?
Yeah.
So, you need to make sure as the landlord that you're providing, you talked about the encryption process, that, because you're taking their social security
Yeah.
number and their license, and now you have their birthday and now their address. So you pretty much have all the information, that's needed for fraudulent process. So
Yes.
make sure that you follow everything that you can do to protect that information from the cloud storage and the encryption, because that's, you don't want to get caught up in that. You don't want to have any negative connotation about
Yep.
your that data being stolen, which is happening every day.
And not only is it the data, but it's the money as well. I think the next big piece of this conversation has to be rent collection and accounting software. So when your tenants are sending money to you, they want to make sure that this transaction is safe. There's so many different platforms out there that can manage those transactions, keep them safe. You'd have Buildium, Appfolio, RentRedi, and Cozy, just to name a few. Those are the big players. So any investors out there looking to go a little bit more tech savvy, make those payments over the web, those are some good places to start.
Well, and automation of collection, is huge. And there's things you can do. It's as good for you as it is for them. It
Yes.
automatically goes in right into your account and it's processed. And you may have to pay a small premium on the receipt side of it,
Yep.
but also that the time that you spend having to chase and deposit checks, I think is made up on the
Exactly.
back end of that. So find ways to, even automating the rent collection and having
Yep.
the receipt of currency is a big deal.
The time saving on that is big. The money collection is huge. But I want to go back to a point you talked about with squatting, how that's becoming an issue at the state level. They're looking to resolve that state by state, right? But with automatic rent reminders, late fee enforcement, these are things that you can go to a court case at your disposal and say, hey, I've automated my rent roll. These people have been dodging me for months. They've gotten 6, 8, 10 reminders
Sure.
that they haven't been paying their rent. Being able to go into a courtroom with any data or anything in your back pocket that can give you a leg up and give the investor some peace of mind heading into the courtroom is big. And that's what these softwares can do.
Well, and making sure that your application process has spelled out all of that,
Yeah.
where your rent is due. If it's not paid by the 10th, here's the premium that it costs you. What are the fees? What are the
Yep.
penalties? And all those things. And when you have to enforce that in a court of law,
Yep.
you can come in with all your ducks in a row and be able to hopefully win that.
And then hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but
Sure.
I think, there's that middle ground of tenant disputes, right? They're like, whoa, why am I getting charged a late fee? Well, not only did you sign a contract that you have to pay your rent on time, but you've got 3 reminders this month that you were a week late, 2 weeks late, and now a month behind. So that's why you got the late fee. And then they don't have a leg to stand on in
Sure.
that case.
And you may want, the flip side of that, you may say, you know what, if you want to pay via Zelle or whatever your collection process is going to be, where it automatically goes into an account,
Yeah.
maybe you offer a slight discount. Maybe you
Yep.
offer,
Yeah.
3% off the rent. There's things that you can do to, and it shows you're more cutting edge.
Yep.
A lot of people don't, I can't tell you the last time I've written a check. And so everything's really done in an
Yeah.
automatic payment
Yeah.
form.
Yeah, and I think the last one is more solely for the investor, but it's the accounting, right? It's the when tax season comes up, you're managing numerous different rentals, fix and flips, whatever the case may be. QuickBooks, anything like that is just going to be a huge, huge asset, a big piece of technology that all investors should be taking care of. Avoid those awkward conversations of, tax penalties, missed numbers. You get to the end of the year, you think you're going to make something, and it comes up $3,000 short. You're like, where did I miss? That's where the accounting software can come into play and really be that quarterback for you and catch any mistakes before they happen.
Well, but you got that for your rent collection, but you also, QuickBooks or whatever package that you're going to use for your accounting software. You can also say, I replaced this flooring, I did this, did the hot water heater, whatever. You're tracking what you've also reinvested into that.
Yeah.
When it comes down to hopefully pay as less tax as you can, but certainly have enough income to support it.
Yep, exactly. So I think we're off to a great start here, leveraging technology. There's so many different ways investors can go about it. We've got a few more topics to dive into. We're going to take a look into the future. Suzanne and I have our crystal ball. We'll tell you some of the future tech that's coming that investors can take advantage of. Stay tuned to this episode of Uncontested Investing.
See you after the break.
RCN Capital offers flexible loan programs designed to help wholesale partners close their clients' deals faster. From fix and flip properties to long-term rentals, new construction, and multifamily investments, we provide your clients with the funding solutions they need. With competitive terms and a quick approval process, we make it easy to focus on growing your business while we handle the financing. Learn more or apply today. Click the link in our bio or email info@rcncapital.com. Let RCN Capital help take your wholesale deals to the next level.
Welcome back to this week's episode of Uncontested Investing. Suzanne and I are discussing leveraging technology to streamline your rental operations. And Suzanne, we're going to pick up right where we left off with maintenance management tech. We had two great conversations with Kelly Brooks of Property Masters and Sean Miller of Lesson. So if you want any background on conversations that we had with them down in Orlando, they provided some great insight. But we're going to pick up where they left off. Maintenance management tech, where do you want to start with this?
So there's a whole different scale of maintenance. There's, coming in and retrofitting the unit from the ground up first before you even put the tenant in there, to managing the turns in between. And there's a lot of, keeping it as cost effective as you can under a timeline that is doable, so you can keep moving forward. But everyone says time is money. It truly is that is truthful there. Where the more time you spend trying to get the tenant in there is less money in your pocket, but also you need to stay on track, because if the tenant thinks they're moving in on the first of the month, it has to be ready by the first of the month. So who's your partner that can manage that for you?
Yep. Meeting those expectations, and companies like Lesson and Property Masters are just so good to have at your disposal, right? And there's tenant maintenance portals that you can create. There's ticketing solutions. So if something goes wrong, the tenant can right away put something online that sends an alert to an owner, and now they're able to solve that problem much quicker because they know about it, rather than potentially a tenant sending an email or calling you on the phone. They have to leave a message. It could be potentially hours before you realize that problem. If you have a built-in solution where you have to be checking something every day because someone can be submitting a ticket when something goes wrong at one of your properties, now you're fixing it so much quicker.
Well, and it's documented on both sides of the equation. The resident puts in their work request, and then you say, hey, Nate, I'd like to come in on Tuesday. Does 3 o'clock work for you? If you don't respond to that, you've at least documented as the landlord your response back to them. You're proactive. But it also comes back to the very beginning of our conversation. It's another technology piece on being really ready to move forward in an automated world. And using the maintenance, piece is a huge added value to that as well.
And it's the tenant experience, right? It gives them an outlet. It feels like they're being heard. I think any tenant out there, if they could have the option of being able to go online and submit a ticket about work they need done at their property, or should you rely on a phone call or an email, they'd easily pick being able to go into a software that they know that the owner is always checking, and they'll be able to take care of that in a timely manner. And I think it works both ways, because then you can connect with local service providers and say, hey, you guys can have access to this as well. I trust you. I've worked with you before. Hopefully it's somebody that you have a solid professional rapport with. But whether it's electrician, plumbing, landscaping. Say, hey, if somebody at one of my properties puts in a ticket and you want to take that work, now you have access to that portal to claim it, and now you're supporting local businesses, you're building partnerships for years to come. Totally something that all investors should be taking advantage of.
And I think Kelly Brooks touched on that a little bit, and she's talked about working in the market. I think she mentioned she was expanding to 3 separate, states. And so now as you grow that, you want to find out who are your local partners. Even when she's growing her network as the maintenance and repair strategy, who can you use? Who can you engage with? Who do you recommend for the electrician or plumbing? So there's the whole side of having the network, but also even moving and expanding your portfolio to building the network.
Yep. And then the last piece of the puzzle, when you're talking about maintenance and management, smart home technology is becoming pervasive in every home now. It's such a thing to be able to even track heat and cooling, security systems, cameras, having all the security at the tip of your finger. And then we even had Danny Lininger of Swidget come on a few months ago now.
Sure.
And talk about being able to have that peace of mind and that security blanket over your home with this technology, even when no one is in it.
Well, that's huge, and there's so many pieces, from when you've completed the renovation, usually the last thing you do is install your new appliances.
Yeah.
So and one of the things that Danny talked about was being able to be notified if the refrigerator's moved away from the wall. But the flip side of that, on a positive segment, is you may, on your dashboard with Swidget, you may realize that your refrigerator is all of a sudden using more energy, and is it because the door was open, or is the compressor going? And we keep coming back to the resident experience. If I said, "Hey Nate, I just realized that your refrigerator has had a huge spike in electricity.
Yep.
I'd like to schedule a maintenance call to see if the compressor's going, or did you come home from work and the door was slightly ajar?"
Yep.
Because either one's fine. Just let me know which way, how you'd like to manage this.
For sure.
Now you've got an ongoing relationship with your tenant, and that's huge. But even, and one of the other pieces that I thought was really cool with Swidget was the humidity detection in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So if the resident forgets to put on the ceiling fan in the shower, and they never do that, or take a really hot shower, but mold is a huge problem. If you could get in front of that and have the fan automatically kick on when it hits a certain humidity. So, and again, now the smart home, these newer, younger residents really want to have the cool house, and having all of this technology built into it is a big deal.
For sure. And one thing that technology does, it allows you to be proactive, as you mentioned, right? So even if there was something wrong with the fridge, don't wait till it's broken to go to the property, assess the damage, order a new fridge. Now your tenant doesn't have a refrigerator for potentially 48 hours to a week's time, depending on availability, things of that nature. So being able to be proactive in a world where your customer or your tenant expects it is huge for an investor.
Well, you didn't pay for the food spoilage either.
Yep.
There's a whole other, there's elements to that, or if you have a water leak and someone's, their paperwork or computer was ruined. There's one's the damage, and the other is the outcome of that damage, and what inconvenience has it caused. And that's a huge problem.
It's hard to quantify inconvenience, but it can be very expensive when you're a real estate investor. And I just think it's the perfect blend of protection and comfort when you have this smart home tech. So really worth looking into as an investor.
Well, and it shows that, it also shows that not every place is going to be perfect all the time. And, everyone expects an issue now and then, but your response rate to that is also going to help on your renewal strategy. That yes, the tenant had a water leak, or yes, the refrigerator broke during their occupancy, but what did you do as a landlord, and how did you respond? That will help them renew the lease, because renewal is just as important as the initial. So it's a big deal.
And we take it for granted because our cell phone has been in our pocket for decades now for some of us. But communication tools between the landlord and tenant, between the investor and tenant, or the resident, so paramount to have that. These are the ways that you can reach me. And then for the onus is then on the investor to be available at those points of communication, whether that's messaging in an app, whether it's Facebook, whether it's just a simple text on a work phone or calling. Having that communication set up is often overlooked when it comes to tech, because it's been something we've been dealing with and we're just so accustomed to. But being upfront with your tenant or your resident and saying, these are the ways you can reach out to me, feel free to use them at any time.
Sure. And it allows you at your leisure also, as the resident, to schedule it.
Yeah.
If you don't want them in the place while you're not there, that's okay. Mm-hmm. You can schedule the maintenance and schedule. It's based upon your comfort level and how you'd like to engage with your landlord.
Yep. and try to keep it to one or two, I would say, is a good frame of reference. Don't give them every way to get in contact with you, Instagram, Facebook, personal phone, work phone, email address. Keep it to one or two so they know. It just reduces misunderstanding. You could be like, oh, I forgot to check. I messaged you on Instagram. You could be like, oh, I forgot to check this today. Make sure that you're always checking in with your points of contact that you're giving your tenants. And I think it goes back to the legal conversation. You can cover all your bases if you say, these are the forms of contact that I gave them. They didn't reach out to me on these, so it was really out of my control. I think it helps investors on the back end too.
Well, and it works on your schedule. If a water leak happens or you see a slight dribble and you shut the water off under the kitchen sink and you say, hey, I saw this last night. If you can get to it, here's, you can time it that way.
Yeah.
Or you can call in from work or on your lunch break, whatever your schedule happens to accommodate. There's a way to reach out and connect with your landlord.
For sure, for sure. And then I think long-term technology, we have analytics and portfolio management. So there's so many different data companies out there that investors can take advantage of. We've talked about them before on the show numerous times, but they have real-time dashboards that can talk about vacancy rates, return on investment, cash flow. There are analytic platforms out there right now that investors should be taking advantage of because what it can do for their portfolio, their long-term goals, and any short-term mishaps that they may have, this can really be the difference maker for a successful portfolio or one that kind of falls off the tracks a little bit.
Well, and making sure you're using the current technology, and it's coming at us faster and faster every day. But find a way to capitalize on that strategy, and track your, and do your homework. Track what the market rates are when you talk about your vacancy rates and stuff like that. 1 month of vacancy is you could just easily reduce the rent by $100 or $50 and not have that vacancy.
Yep.
So, figure out what's more important. If it's a good tenant, keep them there forever. If it's not, raise the rent.
Yep. Yep. Another way investors can use the analytics and the AI as well is, can I identify an underperforming asset? Can I forecast expenses that this property will cost me year over year, right? So there's ways to get ahead of it. Am I falling below market value? Did I charge too much in the last rent increase? Finding that perfect ground that every tenant will be happy with, no matter who you're fielding for your next investment property, is a huge thing, and AI and analytics are at the forefront of that. And I think Sean Morgan from Forecasa was a perfect example, right, of having an analytics platform that investors in the space can go on and use, lenders can go on and use, and even potential renters, tenants, residents, they can go on there as well. So it's really a platform for everybody to kind of see where the market's going, and it has different avenues to help you depending on what you're looking to get out of Forecasa.
Well, I think there's also ways for you to, not only using AI has so many different levels, even, tracking, I'll say, the life expectancy of your appliances.
Yep.
When do you need to start forecasting the roof, repairs and putting on a new roof? So you need to, from your whole ROI on the investment and the longevity of that, what is your time frame and when do you want to do it?
Yep.
So I think there's things that you need to start tracking all of that.
Yeah, and then as we discuss AI, I think it's worth talking about the future of tech, right? We've come so far in such a short amount of time. It's hard to fathom that there's even more layers to this. But I think investors and real estate investors specifically are going to be looking at AI chatbots for tenant inquiries, right? Is something going wrong? Is there a path that they can follow, talking to an AI chatbot that can eventually get to the investor themselves, and then they can handle the problem in a timely manner. And then you have smart locks, keyless entry. All these things are huge assets. We talk about the virtual viewings, the 3D walkthroughs, or now that you can be a nationwide real estate investor, you can trust people that, okay, maybe I'm in California today, but I have a few people in New Mexico going to check out my investment property. Now I can manage them, getting them into my home. I see them on my smart camera. I let them in with keyless entry. So there's so many layers to the future of technology.
And I saw, at a recent trade show I was at, I saw, speaking about the smart lock, you can actually have it turned on when you drive away on your phone. It automatically locks the door, and when you come back in, it unlocks the door. So now you're taking it a step further. You had you got the ease of entry, keying in, but now it knows when you've left and come back, So you don't even have to touch the door. You just walk in and
Yep.
the lock's ready to go. Some cool stuff is out there.
Yeah. And this last piece, I'm surprised we haven't seen this at a trade show yet, but a VR headset for out-of-town showings as well. I can just imagine somebody being in their own living room, seeing a property across the country. So the possibilities are endless, right? There's so many opportunities for tech to just expand, make lives easier for investors all across the country. As we mentioned, there are some pitfalls out there. There are some people that are trying to commit fraudulent activities. So tech can work both ways, right? It can help increase the experience. It can help any headaches or any criminal activity. So both ways, tech helps, and investors should be using it.
And get as comfortable as you can as quickly as possible using it and engaging it, because it's coming at you, that your residents are expecting it right now, and make sure that you have your comfort level, but you've also got everything you can offer that makes it attractive.
Yeah, I think it's important for investors to be ready to step out of their comfort zone because, as you mentioned, it's not about them, it's about the tenant and what they expect. So for Suzanne Andreessen, I'm Nate Zielinski. That was quite the conversation about leveraging technology, whether it's one way or all the ways. Feel free to look into this technology and take advantage of it within your rental portfolio. We will see you next time on Uncontested Investing.
See you soon.
Thank you for listening to Uncontested Investing. Questions about today's episode or the podcast? Email podcast@rcncapital.com and make sure to follow REI Inc. magazine on LinkedIn and Facebook, and RCN Capital on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. See you all next time.